So I get this question a lot. What does the science of reading have to say about the weekly spelling test? It's a fair question because traditional spelling instruction and the weekly tests that go along with it have real problems. If you're new here, my name is Anna Geiger. I'm the author of Reach All Readers, host of the Reach All Readers podcast, and creator of the Reach All Readers Plus membership. My mission is to help K to third grade teachers bridge the gap between what we know from research and what they do in their classroom every day. Here's what traditional Monday through Friday spelling instruction looks like. Students are given a list on Monday. It may or may not be related to what they're learning in phonics or word study. Then during the week, they might copy the words 5 times each, do a few isolated workbook pages, practice the words at home, and then they're tested on Friday. Often we see that after that Friday test, they don't retain the spellings and they misspell them again in their writing. There's often no explicit teaching of why the words are spelled the way they are. Very little in terms of vocabulary instruction related to the words, unless it's in those isolated workbook pages. And mostly a reliance on home practice so that students can study, and pass that test on Friday. What that cycle does is teach students to memorize words by shape or memorize them by memorizing a sequence of letters. But that's not teaching and that's not spelling. Good spelling doesn't come from holding the shape of words in our minds or memorizing a sequence of letters. It comes from understanding how words are represented in print, how meaningful word parts retain their spelling even when pronunciation shifts, and how patterns work across many words, not just single words. The test itself isn't the problem. It's what happens between that Monday and that Friday. That's where we need to look. Let's start with the spelling list itself. Words that aren't related by spelling pattern or morphological word family don't give students anything to generalize. So we don't want to have a list of unrelated words. They need to be connected to each other. Maybe we have multiple spellings for a single phoneme, or we have words from the same family. Maybe they have the same base, like the NATE base, or maybe a couple other ones. If the words are not related, we're asking students to memorize the words, and that's going to be an uphill battle every week and a recipe for forgetting the words the following week. I've seen spelling lists that are vocabulary lists in disguise. If your words are grouped by topic, mammal, habitat, predator, ecosystem, those are great vocabulary words, but they're not a spelling list. A spelling list needs to be teaching students something about how spelling works. And lists that try to cover every single spelling for a phoneme are also a problem. If you're working on the long I sound and you're having students practice spelling that sound, you don't need a list that includes every single spelling for that sound. Time, light, tie, my, bike, fly. Focus on just a few patterns at a time. A good spelling list is tied to your scope and sequence, so it follows along with what you're teaching in phonics or word study. The words on the list reflect the current pattern, and you should also include some review patterns as well. And a good spelling test might include a few transfer words, so words that weren't on the weekly list but follow the same pattern. So you can see that students have generalized what you've taught them. So what needs to happen between Monday and Friday? Even a well-designed list won't do much if there's no instruction during the week. Copying words 5 times each is not meaningful spelling practice. Neither are isolated fill-in-the-blank worksheets. Words need to be explicitly taught, not just assigned. Students need to understand why words are spelled the way they are, even irregular ones. They need to practice spelling through sound mapping, dictation, word ladders. They need to see the pattern in multiple words, practice reading it, practice spelling it, practice writing it. Here's what changes when the list is well designed and the instruction is solid. Friday comes and you're not anxious about what you're going to see on the Friday test because you've been working on these words with your students all week long. You taught these words explicitly, with intention, and gave lots of meaningful practice opportunities so your students are ready for that final test. And then, what matters even more than that is that this spelling knowledge is going to show up later, not just in the Friday test. Not always perfectly, because your students will need different levels of support to make that spelling automatic. But the bottom line is they didn't just memorize the spellings for the Friday test. They learned them. So should we banish the weekly spelling test? I don't think we need to do that, but we do need to take a closer look at what's happening during the week and make sure our instruction is truly building our students up for success, both on that test and remembering those words for the future. If you want to feel confident about how to design spelling lists, teach spelling explicitly, and provide practice opportunities to lead to lasting spelling knowledge, you're invited to my workshop, Spelling Instruction That Sticks. You can find the details and register using the link below this video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.